The morning sun cast long shadows across the mining colony of Kepler 442b as Sarah Chen stepped out of the medical clinic. She had just finished treating 3 miners for radiation burns and a child with a broken arm. Her hands still smelled of antiseptic, but her mind was already on the supply shortage that would hit them next week. Sarah had been the colony's only doctor for 2 years now. The pay was decent, the work meaningful, and most importantly, it was far from Earth. Far from the memories of Afghanistan, from the nightmares that used to wake her husband screaming in the middle of the night. Here, among the red rocks and twin moons of this distant world, they had found peace. She pulled her medical bag closer as she walked down the dusty main street. The colony wasn't much to look at: prefabricated buildings, solar collectors, and the constant hum of atmospheric processors. But it was home. More home than anywhere had been since Jake came back from his 3rd deployment. The Imperial ships appeared without warning. 3 massive vessels descended from the cloud cover like metallic thunderbirds. Their sleek hulls reflected the morning light as they settled onto the landing pads with military precision. Sarah had seen Imperial cruisers before, but never this many at once. Never in a coordinated formation that spoke of serious business. She quickened her pace toward the administrative building. As the colony's chief medical officer, she'd likely be needed if this was some kind of inspection or health survey. The Empire was always checking up on the outer colonies, making sure they were following regulations and paying their taxes. The first soldiers emerged from the ships before the engines had fully powered down. They moved with the practiced efficiency of elite troops, their armor gleaming black and silver in the alien sunlight. Plasma rifles hung at their sides, and their helmets obscured their faces behind reflective visors. Sarah felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. She'd seen soldiers move like that before, during the worst days in Kandahar. This wasn't a routine inspection. "Dr. Sarah Chen?" The voice came from behind her, electronically modulated through a helmet speaker. She turned to find 3 Imperial soldiers approaching. Their leader, distinguished by gold trim on his armor, held a datapad in his gauntleted hand. "Yes, that's me," Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady. "Is there something I can help you with?" "You are under arrest by order of the Galactic Imperial Authority." The words hit her like a physical blow. "You will come with us immediately." Arrested? For what? Sarah's medical training kicked in, keeping her calm even as her heart raced. "I demand to know the charges." The soldier consulted his datapad. "Violation of Imperial Medical Code 7.4.2, providing unauthorized treatment to rebel sympathizers. Violation of Imperial Security Code 12.1.8, failure to report suspected insurgent activity. Violation of—" "This is ridiculous," and Sarah interrupted. "I'm a doctor. I treat everyone who needs medical care. That's not a crime, it's my oath." "Your Earth oaths hold no authority under Imperial law," the soldier replied coldly. "You will come with us now, or we will use force." Sarah looked around the street. Colonists had emerged from buildings and stopped their morning routines to stare. She saw fear in their eyes and something else. The same helpless anger she'd felt watching her own government abandon the people they'd promised to protect. "Am I allowed to contact anyone?" "My husband. No communications are permitted. Move." They escorted her to the largest of the 3 ships. The interior was all gleaming metal and harsh white lights. Sarah had been in military transports before, but Imperial technology made even the most advanced human vessels look primitive. Everything hummed with barely contained power. They placed her in a detention cell that was more comfortable than she'd expected. The walls were a soft gray composite, and there was even a small viewport showing the colony shrinking below as they lifted off. But comfortable or not, it was still a cage. As the hours passed, Sarah's mind raced. The charges were obviously fabricated. Yes, she'd treated people without checking their political affiliations first. Yes, she'd failed to report suspicious conversations that were probably just colonists complaining about Imperial taxes. But these weren't real crimes. This had to be about something else. Something bigger. The Empire controlled over 3,000 star systems, with a military that made Earth's combined forces look like a neighborhood watch. They didn't send 3 cruisers and a company of elite soldiers to arrest 1 doctor for treating the wrong patients. There was something they wanted from her, or something they thought she knew. Sarah pressed her face to the viewport and watched the stars wheel past. Somewhere out there, in a solar system that was now just another point of light. Jake was probably finishing his morning coffee. He'd be checking the perimeter sensors, cleaning his rifle, and planning his hunting trip for the weekend. He had no idea that his wife had just been arrested by the most powerful military force in known space. Jake had always been protective. Even before the war, even before the things he'd done in the mountains of Afghanistan had changed him, he'd been the kind of man who couldn't stand to see injustice go unpunished. The Empire had just made the biggest mistake in their long and bloody history. They thought they'd arrested a small-town doctor whose worst crime was treating patients without checking their politics first. They had no idea they'd just declared war on a man who'd spent 15 years perfecting the art of killing from impossible distances, a man who'd been personally responsible for eliminating over 200 high-value targets across 3 theaters of operation. The Empire was about to learn why Earth's snipers were legend among the mercenary companies, and why even the most hardened alien warriors spoke of human marksmanship in hushed, respectful tones. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to sleep. Jake would come for her. She had no doubt about that. The only question was how much of the galaxy would burn before he got her back. The Imperial soldiers congratulated themselves on a successful operation as their ships jumped to hyperspace. They'd captured their target without casualties and would be back at the regional headquarters within the week. None of them had bothered to run a background check on Dr. Sarah Chen's family. Jake Chen finished his morning patrol around the settlement's perimeter and checked his watch. Sarah should have been back from the clinic by now. She always made it home by noon on Tuesdays, usually carrying some wild story about the miners and their creative ways of injuring themselves. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat on the porch of their small prefab house. The twin moons were visible in the daylight sky, hanging like pale ghosts above the red rock formations that surrounded their little colony. It was peaceful here, quiet, the kind of place where a man could forget the things he'd done in darker corners of the galaxy. Jake had needed that peace more than he'd ever admitted to Sarah. 15 years as a sniper had left, marks that went deeper than the scars on his body. 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in the Proxima campaign, and countless Black Ops missions that officially never happened. He'd been the ghost in the mountains, the shadow that reached out across impossible distances to touch the untouchable. But that was before Sarah had convinced him to leave the service and try civilian life. Before they'd found this little mining colony at the edge of civilized space where nobody asked questions about your past and everybody minded their own business. The sound of running feet broke his peaceful thoughts. Tommy Martinez, one of the younger miners, was sprinting up the dirt road toward Jake's house. The kid's face was flushed and his eyes were wide with panic. "Mr. Chen! Mr. Chen!" Tommy gasped as he reached the porch. "They took her. They took Dr. Sarah." Jake set down his coffee cup very carefully. When he spoke, his voice was perfectly calm. "Who took her, Tommy?" "Imperial soldiers. 3 big ships came down this morning and they arrested her right in front of the clinic. Said she was breaking some kind of medical law. They didn't even let her call you or anything." The world seemed to slow down around Jake. He could hear his heartbeat in his ears, feel the familiar cold spreading through his chest that he'd learned to recognize as his combat mind taking over. How long ago? Maybe 6 hours? They left right after, headed up toward the jump point. Jake stood up and walked into the house. Tommy followed, still talking rapidly about Imperial authority and jurisdiction and how unfair it all was. Jake wasn't listening anymore. He was calculating distances, hyperspace routes, and the operational capabilities of Imperial detention vessels. 6 hours was a long head start, but Imperial ships weren't built for speed. They were built for intimidation and heavy combat. Their detention protocols would require them to follow specific routes to designated processing centers. Jake had studied Imperial military doctrine extensively during his active years. Know your enemy's procedures and you could predict their movements. He pulled out his personal data pad and began accessing databases he wasn't supposed to know about. His military clearance had been revoked when he mustered out, but Jake had friends in the intelligence community. Friends who owed him favors, Mr. Chen. Tommy's voice seemed to come from very far away. "What are you doing?" "Research," Jake said without looking up. His fingers flew across the data pad's interface, pulling up shipping manifests, Imperial fleet movements, and detention facility locations. "Tommy, I need you to do something for me." "Anything, Mr. Chen." Dr. Sarah saved my little sister's life last year when she got sick. We'll do whatever you need." Jake looked up at the young miner. Tommy was maybe 22 with the kind of earnest face that belonged in a recruitment poster. He probably had no idea what he was volunteering for. "I need you to go to the mining supervisor and tell him I'm taking emergency leave. Family crisis. Then I need you to help me load some equipment into my ship." "Your ship?" Tommy looked confused. "I didn't know you had a ship." Jake smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "There's a lot about me you don't know, kid." The ship was hidden in a cave system about 5 kilometers from the colony. Jake had purchased it through intermediaries and kept it carefully concealed from both Imperial registration databases and his wife's knowledge. Sarah thought he'd given up the dangerous life completely. She didn't need to know about the contingency plans he'd made for situations exactly like this. The vessel itself was a modified Kestrel-class courier, built for speed and stealth rather than comfort. Jake had spent 2 years and most of his military savings upgrading its systems. Enhanced engines, military-grade sensors, and most importantly, a cargo hold that had been converted into something very different from its original purpose. Tommy whistled softly as they entered the hidden hangar. "This is yours? It looks like a military ship." "It used to be," Jake said, running his hands over the familiar controls. "Help me with those cases in the back." The cases contained the tools of Jake's former trade. 3 different rifle systems, each designed for specific ranges and target types. Ammunition that could punch through starship hull plating. Optics that could track a target across continents. And in the largest case, carefully cushioned in foam, the weapon that had made him legend among Earth's special forces. The MK-47 precision system was less rifle than technological marvel. Its smart rounds could adjust their trajectory mid-flight. Its scope could calculate ballistics across different gravity fields and atmospheric conditions, and its maximum effective range was measured in light seconds rather than kilometers. Jake had personally verified kills at distances that most snipers would consider impossible. "Jesus," Tommy breathed, staring at the weapons. "What did you do in the military?" Jake sealed the cases and began loading them into the ship's cargo bay. "I eliminated problems that couldn't be solved through normal diplomatic channels. It took them 2 hours to complete the loading. Food, water, extra power cells, and enough ammunition to fight a small war." Jake had learned long ago that it was better to have too much gear than too little. As Tommy helped him run the final systems checks, Jake accessed the colony's communication array. He sent 3 messages. The first was to Sarah's father on Earth, a brief note explaining that she'd been taken and that he was going to get her back. The second was to his former commanding officer, a request for any intelligence on Imperial detention protocols. The third message was encrypted and sent to an address that didn't officially exist. It contained only a few words. "Package taken. Going fishing. J." Within hours, certain people in certain places would know that Jake Chen was active again. Equipment would be moved, favors would be called in, and the underground network of former special operations personnel would begin to stir. The Empire thought they'd arrested a doctor. They had no idea they'd just triggered a response from Earth's most dangerous predator. Jake sealed the ship and began his pre-flight sequence. Through the viewport, he could see Tommy standing at the cave entrance, looking lost and worried. "Take care of the colony while I'm gone," Jake called out. "And Tommy? If anyone asks, you never saw this ship." The young miner nodded and stepped back as the engines began to warm up. Jake ran through his flight plan one more time. First stop, the information brokers on Nova Station, then to the Imperial border, where he'd begin hunting the ships that had taken his wife. Sarah was somewhere out there in the dark between stars, probably scared and definitely angry. Jake smiled grimly as he lifted off. She'd always said he was overprotective. She was about to find out exactly how protective he could be. Nova Station hung in space like a massive steel spider, its docking arms extending in all directions to accommodate the hundreds of ships that visited daily. It was a free port, technically neutral territory where the Empire's authority was more suggestion than law. Here, information was currency and questions were rarely asked about a person's background. Jake's ship slipped through the controlled chaos of arriving and departing vessels with practiced ease. He'd been here before during his military years, when missions required the kind of intelligence that couldn't be gathered through official channels. The docking controller's voice crackled through his comm system. Courier vessel Phantom Wind. You're cleared for docking bay 77. Port fees are 200 credits payable on arrival. Acknowledged control. Jake guided his ship into the designated bay and shut down the engines. The familiar weight of artificial gravity settled around him as the station's systems took over. Nova's station smelled like recycled air, machine oil, and the 1,000 different worlds its visitors called home. Jake made his way through the crowded corridors, past merchants hawking everything from rare minerals to black market weapon modifications. Nobody paid attention to one more spacer in worn civilian clothes. The information broker Jake sought operated out of a small shop in the station's commercial district. The sign outside read Stellar Cartography Services, but everyone knew that Zara Okafor's real business was intelligence. She'd been selling secrets for 20 years and had developed a reputation for accuracy that was worth its weight in platinum. The shop's interior was cramped and cluttered with star charts, data cores, and navigation equipment. Behind the counter sat a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. She looked up as Jake entered, and recognition flickered across her face. Well, Jake Chen, I heard you'd gone respectable." Zara's accent carried traces of her Nigerian heritage mixed with the universal spacer drawl. "Marriage and civilian life treating you well?" "Not at the moment," Jake said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "I need information, Zara. The kind that costs serious money. Your money's always been good here. What do you need to know?" Jake pulled out his data pad and showed her the limited information he'd gathered about the Imperial ships that had taken Sarah. 3 Imperial cruisers lifted off from Kepler 442b approximately 18 hours ago. They had a detainee aboard. I need to know where they were headed. Zara's fingers danced across her terminal's keyboard. Data streams flickered across multiple screens as she accessed her network of contacts and information sources. Imperial cruisers? Detention operation. Yes, I see it. ICS Dominator, ICS Inevitable, and ICS Retribution. Heavy escort for a single prisoner pickup. Heavy escort for a small-town doctor, Jake said grimly. That tells me this isn't what it appears to be. Your wife is Dr. Sarah Chen, correct? Former battlefield medic turned civilian physician? Zara's expression grew serious as she read from her screens. Jake, this isn't a random arrest. Someone specifically targeted her. Explain. Zara turned her monitor so Jake could see the data. The arrest order came directly from Imperial Intelligence, not local authorities. It was signed by Director Voss himself. When the director personally signs detention orders, it means high-level political importance. Jake felt the cold anger in his chest growing. Director Klaus Voss was the Empire's chief intelligence officer, a man whose name was spoken in whispers throughout the galaxy. He didn't concern himself with minor medical violations on frontier colonies. Where are they taking her? That's where it gets interesting. Zara highlighted a shipping manifest. The official destination is Detention Facility Omega-7 in the Arcturus system. But look at this fuel consumption data I pulled from the Port Authority. Jake studied the numbers. His years of military logistics training let him calculate the implications quickly. They're carrying too much fuel for a direct route to Arcturus. Exactly. They're making a stop somewhere that's not on their official flight plan. My best guess is Research Station Prometheus in the Vega system. The name hit Jake like a physical blow. Prometheus Station was where the Empire conducted its most classified experiments. Biological weapons, psychological manipulation, alien technology, reverse engineering. If Sarah was being taken there, her situation was far worse than a simple detention. How confident are you in that assessment? 80%. Maybe higher. Zara leaned back in her chair. Jake, whatever your wife knows or whatever they think she knows, it's important enough to involve their top people. This isn't a rescue mission anymore. It's a war. Jake transferred 20,000 credits to Zara's account without hesitation. I need more than information. I need equipment and contacts. What kind of equipment? The kind that makes Imperial cruisers disappear. Zara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was carefully neutral. That's a big request. The kind that attracts attention from very dangerous people. I'm already on their list. The question is whether you want to be on it too. She studied his face, looking for signs of the man she'd known during the war. The ghost who'd reached across star systems to eliminate targets that entire fleets couldn't touch. There's a weapons dealer 3 levels down. Bay 42. Tell him Zara sent you and mention the Kandahar contract. He'll know what that means. Jake stood and headed for the door. What about transportation? I need something faster than what I've got. The dealer might be able to help with that too. But Jake, he turned back to her. Be careful. The Empire has been cracking down on unauthorized military hardware. If they catch you with the kind of weapons you're looking for, they won't catch me, Jake said simply. They never have before. The weapons dealer turned out to be a Centaurian named Vex who operated out of a converted cargo bay. His shop was a maze of weapon racks, armor displays, and modification equipment that would have made an Imperial quartermaster weep with envy. Vex was 3 meters tall with 4 arms and skin that shifted color depending on his mood. Currently, he was a nervous green color as he examined Jake's credentials. Kandahar contract, he said in the universal trade language. Very dangerous reputation. Very expensive reputation. What does Ghost Sniper need from humble weapons merchant? Jake handed him a list he'd prepared during the walk down from Zara's shop. Vex's color shifted to a surprised blue as he read through the items. Anti-ship missiles. Plasma charges. Long-range targeting systems. This is equipment for killing starships, not people. I'm hunting bigger game than usual. Imperial cruisers are very large game. Very dangerous game. Have powerful shields, heavy armor, skilled crews. Vex's skin was now a worried purple. Also have friends who ask uncomfortable questions about who sells weapons to their enemies. Jake pulled out a credit chip worth more than most people saw in a lifetime. I'm not asking you to take sides in a war. I'm asking you to sell me the tools to get my wife back. The Centaurian skin shifted to gold, the color of greed overcoming caution. Very romantic. Very expensive romance. Come, let me show you what might be possible. An hour later, Jake was the owner of enough military-grade hardware to outfit a small rebellion. The crown jewel was a modified plasma torpedo system that Vex claimed could punch through Imperial shielding. It would require mounting on a larger ship than his courier vessel, but that problem would have to be solved later. One more thing, Jake said, as Vex's workers loaded the weapons into secure containers. I need to contact someone in Imperial space. Secure communication, untraceable. Very dangerous. Imperial communications are heavily monitored. It's worth another 50,000 credits. Vex's skin went gold again. Perhaps something can be arranged. 20 minutes later, Jake was seated in a shielded communication booth deep in the station's lower levels. The encryption system would route his message through a dozen intermediary stations, making it virtually impossible to trace. He composed a brief message and sent it to a contact he hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Marcus, they have Sarah, Prometheus Station. Need intel on current security protocols and shift rotations. Also need bigger ship. Can pay top rate. J. Marcus Webb had been Jake's spotter during their years in special operations. If anyone could get him the information he needed to infiltrate an Imperial research facility, it was Marcus. The man had a talent for appearing where he wasn't supposed to be, and obtaining information that didn't officially exist. The reply came faster than Jake had expected. Heard about the arrest? Already working on it. Meet me at Titan shipyards in the Sol system. Have exactly what you need. And Jake, bring everything. This is going to get messy. M. Jake smiled for the first time since Tommy had brought him the news of Sarah's arrest. Marcus was still out there, still watching his back after all these years. The Empire had made their move, but now Earth's deadliest sniper was moving too. He made his way back to his ship, his mind already calculating hyperspace routes and travel times. Sarah had maybe a week before they reached Prometheus Station. A week to mount a rescue that would require him to assault one of the most heavily defended facilities in Imperial space. The Empire thought they held all the cards. They were about to learn that humans didn't play by anyone else's rules. The Sol system looked different than Jake remembered. Earth hung in space like a blue marble, its orbital platforms and defense stations gleaming in the sunlight. Humanity's home system had grown more militarized since his last visit, a response to increasing tensions with the Empire's expansionist policies. Titan shipyards orbited Saturn like a massive industrial complex, its construction bays and dry docks working around the clock to build humanity's fleet. Jake's courier ship was just another small vessel among the hundreds of craft moving through the controlled traffic patterns. He found Marcus Webb exactly where he'd expected, in a dingy bar called The Broken Engine that catered to off-duty shipyard workers and questionable characters. Marcus looked older than his 45 years. his brown hair now streaked with gray and his face carrying new lines around the eyes. But when he spotted Jake entering the bar, his grin was exactly the same as it had been in the mountains of Afghanistan. "Jake Chen, you magnificent bastard." Marcus stood and embraced his former partner. "I was starting to think you'd gone completely soft out there in the colonies." "Soft enough to let my guard down," Jake admitted, settling into the booth across from Marcus. "Tell me you have good news." "Define good." Marcus activated a privacy field generator that would scramble any listening devices. "I've got intelligence on Prometheus Station, and I've got a ship that can get you there. The bad news is that what you're planning is absolutely insane." Jake ordered a whiskey and waited. Marcus had always been methodical in his briefings, laying out every detail with military precision. Prometheus Station is in the Vega system, orbiting the fourth planet. It's officially a research facility studying alien artifacts, but my sources say they're doing much more than that. Biological weapons, mind control experiments, interrogation techniques that make old Earth's worst look like gentle conversation. Security? 12 Imperial destroyers on permanent patrol, plus the station's own defensive systems. Shield generators that could stop a battleship assault, automated weapon platforms, and about 3,000 military personnel on board at any given time. Jake sipped his whiskey and considered the odds. A direct assault was impossible, even with the weapons he'd acquired on Nova's station. What about getting inside quietly? That's where it gets interesting. Marcus pulled out a datapad and showed Jake a schematic of the station. Every 2 weeks, they bring in a supply convoy from the Imperial Logistics Depot at Vega Prime. Automated cargo haulers, minimal crew, basic security. If someone were to say hide inside one of those cargo containers, "How do you know all this?" Marcus's grin widened. "Because I've been planning to hit that place for 6 months. The Empire grabbed my niece during a raid on the Proxima colonies. Intelligence says she's being held there for questioning about rebel activities. She's 16, Jake. 16 years old, and they're doing God knows what to her." Jake felt a cold satisfaction. Marcus had his own reasons for wanting to hurt the Empire, which meant Jake wouldn't be going in alone. "What's your plan?" "Infiltrate during the next supply run, which happens in 4 days. Get inside, locate our people, and get them out. The trick is doing it without alerting the entire Imperial fleet." "Show me the ship." Marcus led him through the shipyard's maze of construction bays to a secured area where military contractors worked on classified projects. Their destination was a modified assault transport that looked like it had been built for war. "Meet the Retribution," Marcus said, patting the ship's armored hull. "Officially, she's a deep space exploration vessel. Unofficially, she's equipped with enough firepower to take on an Imperial destroyer and enough stealth technology to ghost past most sensor arrays." Jake walked around the ship, noting the concealed weapon mounts and the advanced engine configuration. "Where did you get this?" "Let's just say there are people in Earth's government who aren't happy with the Empire's recent actions. People with access to black budgets and experimental technology. The ship's interior was a perfect blend of military efficiency and advanced technology. The cargo bay had been converted into an armory that would have impressed Jake's old Special Forces unit. Weapons, explosives, surveillance equipment, and most importantly, stealth suits that would let them move through the station undetected. "There's more," Marcus said, leading Jake to the ship's intelligence center. "I've been in contact with other people who have reasons to hate the Empire. We're not going in alone." The center's main screen lit up with personnel files. Jake recognized some of the names: former special operations soldiers, intelligence operatives, and mercenaries with impressive reputations. All of them had been hurt by the Empire in one way or another. Elena Vasquez, former Marine sniper. The Empire killed her entire unit during the Centauri incident. David Park, ex-Navy intelligence. They destroyed his home colony for harboring rebels. Sarah Kim, demolitions expert. Her family was executed for seditious activities. Jake studied each file carefully. These weren't just soldiers of fortune looking for a payday. These were people with personal stakes in seeing the Empire burn. How many total? 8, including us. Enough to hit the station from multiple directions and create the kind of chaos we'll need to get our people out. And after we rescue them, the Empire won't just let this slide. Marcus's expression grew grim. "That's the best part. Our government contacts have assured us that Earth will provide sanctuary for anyone involved in this operation." "The political situation has changed. Jake, There are people in high places who think it's time to remind the Empire that humanity isn't their vassal state. Jake felt a familiar stirring in his chest, the cold excitement that came before a particularly dangerous mission. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. This was the opening move in a larger conflict that had been brewing for years. When do we leave? Tomorrow night. That gives us time to brief the team and make final preparations. Marcus handed Jake a secure communicator. Channel 7 will connect you to the team. They're all eager to meet the famous Ghost of Kandahar. That evening, Jake met with the rest of the team in a secure conference room deep within the shipyard. Each member brought their own skills and their own reasons for wanting to strike back at the Empire. Elena Vasquez was exactly what Jake expected from a Marine sniper. Compact, precise, and radiating controlled violence. She studied Jake with professional interest as they shook hands. "I've read your service record," she said. 2-kilometer confirmed kill shot on Proxima. That's impossible shooting. Everything's impossible until someone does it, Jake replied. David Park was quieter, a thin man with intelligent eyes who'd spent years infiltrating Imperial facilities. "I've got updated intelligence on Prometheus Station's internal layout. Security rotations, blind spots in their surveillance, and most importantly, the location of the detention levels." Sarah Kim, despite her name, was a large woman with calloused hands and a cheerful demeanor that didn't quite hide the anger in her eyes. "I've prepared special charges for the station's power grid. When I'm done, they'll be running on emergency power for hours." The others were equally impressive. A pilot who'd flown Black Ops missions in Imperial space, a communications specialist who could hack any system, and a medic who'd kept teams alive in the worst combat zones humanity had ever seen. As Marcus outlined the mission plan, Jake felt the familiar weight of command settling on his shoulders. These people were looking to him for leadership, trusting him to bring them through the most dangerous operation any of them had ever attempted. "We go in quiet," Jake said when Marcus finished. "No unnecessary risks, no heroics. We get our people and we get out. But if things go wrong..." He looked around the table at each team member. "The Empire has been pushing humanity around for too long. Maybe it's time to push back." Elena smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "I was hoping you'd say that." Outside the conference room windows, Earth turned slowly in space. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, Imperial ships were carrying Sarah and Marcus's niece toward a fate that Jake refused to contemplate. In 4 days, the Empire would learn that taking a human's family was the worst mistake they could possibly make. The hunt was about to begin in earnest. The cargo container was cramped, dark, and smelled like industrial lubricants. Jake shifted slightly, trying to find a position that didn't make his legs cramp, and checked his chronometer for the 100th time. They'd been sealed inside for 6 hours, hidden among legitimate medical supplies bound for Prometheus Station. Through his earpiece, he could hear the steady breathing of his team members, each hidden in their own containers throughout the convoy. Marcus was 3 containers away, Elena was in the container behind him, and the rest of the team was scattered through the shipment according to their specialized roles. "Retribution actual to Ghost Team," came David Park's voice over the encrypted comm channel. "Imperial checkpoint in 30 minutes. Remember, complete comm silence until we dock." Jake double-checked his gear one final time. The stealth suit felt like a second skin, its adaptive camouflage systems ready to bend light around him and make him nearly invisible. His rifle was broken down into components that scanners would read as medical equipment. The Empire's own arrogance was working against them. Who would suspect that a shipment of surgical supplies contained humanity's deadliest sniper? The cargo hauler shuddered slightly as it dropped out of hyperspace. Through the container's thin walls, Jake could hear the hum of Imperial scanner arrays washing over the convoy. His breathing automatically slowed as his combat conditioning took over. This was the critical moment. If Imperial security had been upgraded, if their scanners were more sophisticated than David's intelligence suggested, the mission would end before it began. Minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Jake forced himself to remain perfectly still, knowing that even the slightest movement might register on motion sensors. He'd spent days in similar positions during his military career, waiting for the perfect shot or the right moment to strike. Patience was as much a weapon as his rifle. "Imperial control to Convoy 77 Alpha," came a bored voice over the ship's communication system. "You are cleared for docking at Bay 12. follow standard decontamination procedures. Jake felt a surge of relief, followed immediately by renewed tension. They were through the first checkpoint, but the real danger was just beginning. Prometheus Station was a fortress in space, and they were walking directly into its heart. The docking process took another hour. Jake felt the cargo hauler's artificial gravity shift as they matched rotation with the station, followed by the solid thunk of docking clamps engaging. Then came the sounds he'd been waiting for, the hiss of airlocks equalizing and the heavy footsteps of Imperial dock workers beginning to unload the cargo. Through his earpiece, Jake heard Sarah Kim's whispered voice. "Demolitions team in position. Power grid charges are armed and ready." "Overwatch team ready," added Elena from her container. "I have sight lines on the main docking control room." One by one, the team reported their status. David was already accessing the station's computer network through a maintenance terminal. Their pilot was standing by with the Retribution, hidden in the asteroid field just outside the system's edge. Their medic was ready with medical supplies and extraction equipment. The sounds of unloading grew closer. Jake could hear Imperial workers complaining about overtime schedules and discussing their plans for the next shore leave. Normal people doing normal jobs, unaware that death was hiding in the boxes they were moving. Jake's container shuddered as a loading mech grabbed it and lifted it toward the station. Through tiny sensors built into the container walls, he could see the interior of Prometheus Station for the first time. It was massive, with corridors that stretched away in all directions and ceiling that disappeared into shadows far above. The architecture was purely Imperial, all sharp angles and intimidating proportions designed to make visitors feel small and powerless. The container was deposited in a storage bay along with dozens of others. Jake waited, counting seconds in his head until he heard the distinctive sound of the bay doors sealing. Then came David's voice over the comm. "Ghost Team, this is Overwatch. Bay is sealed and guards have moved to standard patrol positions. You are clear to execute Phase 2. Jake activated the container's emergency release mechanism and slipped out into the storage bay. The stealth suit immediately adapted to the lighting conditions, rendering him nearly invisible to both human eyes and electronic sensors. Around the bay, his team members were emerging from their own containers like deadly shadows. Marcus appeared first, followed by Elena, who was already assembling her sniper rifle with practiced efficiency. Sarah Kim was unpacking her demolition charges, each one carefully designed to cripple specific systems without causing catastrophic station damage. They needed to get their people out alive. "David, what's our route to the detention levels?" Jake whispered into his comm. "Service corridors, level 7. I'm uploading the path to your suit's navigation system now. But Jake, there's something you need to know. According to the duty roster, your wife isn't in general detention." Jake felt ice form in his stomach. "Where is she?" "Director Voss's personal research section. Maximum security, isolated from the rest of the station." "Jake, they're not just holding her. They're experimenting on her." The cold rage that Jake had been holding in check finally broke free. The Empire hadn't just arrested his wife. They were torturing her in the name of science. Around him, he could see similar expressions of fury on his team's faces as they processed David's intelligence. "Change of plans," Jake said, his voice deadly calm. "Sarah, I want those power systems down in exactly 10 minutes. Elena, find yourself a position with sight lines on the research section. Everyone else, we're going hunting." "Jake," Marcus warned, "if we go loud too early, they'll lock down the entire station." "Then we'd better move fast." Jake checked his rifle one final time and started toward the service corridors. The Empire wanted to see what happens when they take a human's family. Time to give them a demonstration they'll never forget. The service corridors of Prometheus Station were a maze of pipes, conduits, and maintenance equipment. Jake moved through them like a ghost, his stealth suit adapting to every shadow and surface. Behind him, his team spread out according to their assigned roles, each one a lethal professional with years of experience in exactly this kind of operation. The first Imperial guard died without knowing what hit him. Jake's knife slid between the man's ribs with surgical precision, and the body was hidden behind a power coupling, before the guard's patrol partner even noticed he was missing. Throughout the station, similar scenes were playing out as Jake's team eliminated threats with quiet efficiency. "Research section located," Elena reported from her Overwatch position. "I count 12 guards on the main level plus automated defenses. Jake, the security on this section is insane. They've got energy barriers, motion sensors, and what looks like poison gas dispensers. Can you get me a clear shot at the control room? Negative. Too much cover, and they've got the whole area under constant surveillance. Jake studied the tactical display on his suit's heads-up system. The research section was a fortress within a fortress, designed to keep prisoners in and rescuers out. A direct assault would be suicide, but Jake had spent 15 years finding ways to kill people who thought they were untouchable. David, I need you to access the research section's environmental controls. Already working on it. Give me 2 minutes to crack their encryption. Sarah, status on those power charges? 30 seconds to detonation. Hope everyone's ready for a light show. Jake positioned himself at the junction of 3 service corridors, each leading to a different section of the research level. When Sarah's charges detonated, the station would go dark for exactly 90 seconds before emergency power kicked in. 90 seconds to penetrate the most secure facility in Imperial space and reach his wife. Charges away, Sarah announced. The lights went out throughout Prometheus Station. Emergency klaxons began wailing as the facility's computer systems struggled to compensate for the sudden power loss. Jake was already moving, his suit's night vision turning the dark corridors into a green-tinted maze of opportunity. Behind him, he could hear the distinctive sound of Elena's rifle as she began eliminating guards from her sniper's perch. The hunt had begun, and the Empire was about to learn why humans were the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. Sarah was somewhere in the darkness ahead, probably scared and certainly in pain. But she was also smart enough to know that the sudden power failure meant rescue was coming. Jake smiled grimly as he approached the research section's outer defenses. The Empire had made their move. Now it was humanity's turn. The research section's security barriers flickered and died as Sarah's charges plunged Prometheus Station into darkness. Jake moved through the corridors like a wraith, his enhanced vision turning the emergency lighting into a maze of shadows and opportunities. Behind him, the sound of Elena's rifle echoed through the station as she systematically eliminated guards from her Overwatch position. Ghost Actual, this is Overwatch. David's voice crackled through Jake's earpiece. I'm in their system. Research section has been isolated from station security. You've got maybe 3 minutes before they restore power and lock everything down. Jake reached the research section's main entrance, where 2 Imperial guards were frantically trying to restore power to their security console. They never saw him coming. His knife found the first guard's throat while his sidearm put a silenced round through the second guard's head. Both bodies dropped without a sound. The security door was a massive steel barrier designed to stop assault teams and energy weapons. But Jake wasn't interested in breaking through it. David had given him something better, administrative access to the station's computer network. Jake plugged his suit's interface into the door's control panel and watched as David's intrusion programs tore through the security protocols. Within seconds, the massive door began to slide open with a soft hiss of hydraulics. Research level secured, Jake whispered into his comm. Beginning prisoner extraction. The research section was a maze of laboratories, interrogation chambers, and holding cells. Jake moved through them methodically, checking each room for signs of his wife. What he found made his blood run cold. Medical equipment designed for torture rather than healing. Computer files detailing experiments on human physiology and psychology. Evidence of atrocities that would have made the worst war criminals in human history look merciful. In the third laboratory, Jake found Director Voss. The man was tall and thin, with the kind of pale complexion that came from spending years aboard sterile starships. He was standing over a computer terminal, frantically trying to delete files as Jake's stealth suit materialized out of the shadows. Director Klaus Voss, I presume, Jake said, his rifle trained on the man's chest. Voss spun around, his eyes wide with shock and fear. Who are you? How did you get past station security? I'm Jake Chen. You arrested my wife. Jake's voice was perfectly calm, but there was death in his eyes. Where is she? I don't know what you're talking about. Dr. Chen is a subject in our research program. Her location is classified information that I cannot. Jake's rifle butt struck Voss across the face, sending the director sprawling to the floor. Blood poured from his broken nose as Jake knelt beside him. Let me explain something to you, Jake said conversationally. I've spent 15 years killing people who thought they were untouchable. Warlords, terrorists, enemy commanders who hid behind armies and fortresses. You're just another target. Voss tried to scramble away, but Jake grabbed his collar and hauled him upright. My wife, where is she? Sub-level 3. Voss gasped. Isolation chamber 7. But you'll never reach her. This station has 3,000 troops and... Jake's knife slid between Voss's ribs with surgical precision. The director's eyes went wide with shock as he realized he was dying. You made one mistake, Jake whispered as Voss collapsed. You thought taking my family would make me surrender. Instead, you just declared war on the wrong species. Jake left the director's body where it fell and moved deeper into the research section. Sub-level 3 was 2 floors down, accessible only through a heavily secured elevator that required biometric identification. Fortunately, Director Voss's palm print and retinal scan still worked for several minutes after death. The elevator descended through the station's superstructure with mechanical efficiency. Jake checked his chronometer and grimaced. He'd been inside the research section for 4 minutes now. Emergency power would be restored soon, and with it, all of the station's security systems. Ghost Actual, this is Demolitions. Sarah Kim's voice crackled through his earpiece. I've got Imperial security teams moving toward your position. They know something's wrong. Overwatch status report, Jake called. 17 guards down, but they're bringing in reinforcements, Elena replied. I count at least a full company moving toward the research section. You need to move fast. The elevator opened onto a corridor that looked more like a prison than a research facility. Heavy steel doors lined both walls, each one marked with numbers and classification codes. Jake found Isolation Chamber 7 halfway down the corridor and activated Voss's access codes. The door slid open to reveal a small room with white walls and harsh lighting. In the center, strapped to a medical table, was Sarah. She was unconscious with dozens of monitoring wires attached to her body and an IV drip running into her arm. Her face was pale and drawn, showing the effects of whatever the Empire had been doing to her. But she was alive, and that was all that mattered. Jake quickly disconnected the monitoring equipment and checked Sarah's vital signs. Her pulse was weak but steady, and her breathing was regular. Whatever drugs they'd given her, she'd survive them. Sarah, Jake whispered, gently shaking her shoulder. Sarah, wake up. We're going home. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening as she recognized his face. Jake, how did you... Where are we? Prometheus Station. Imperial Research Facility. But not for much longer. Jake began cutting the restraints that held her to the table. Can you walk? I think so. Sarah struggled to sit up, her movements weak but determined. Jake, they were asking me about you. About your military service, your missions, the people you worked with. They know everything. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's air conditioning. If the Empire knew his complete service record, they might know about his contacts, his safe houses, his extraction routes. This rescue mission might be walking into a trap. We'll worry about that later, Jake said, helping Sarah to her feet. Right now, we need to get off this station. The corridor outside the isolation chamber was still empty, but Jake could hear the sound of boots on metal as Imperial troops moved through the upper levels. They had minutes at most before the research section was completely surrounded. Ghost Actual, this is Pilot, came a new voice over the comm. Retribution is in position at the extraction point. But Jake, we've got problems. Imperial fleet is moving to intercept. Looks like they figured out this wasn't a random terrorist attack. Jake supported Sarah as they moved toward the elevator. Her strength was returning gradually, but she was still weak from whatever the Empire had done to her. All teams, this is Ghost Actual, Jake said into his comm. Execute withdrawal plan Omega, we are leaving now. What about Marcus's niece? Elena asked. Jake had been dreading this moment. David, what's her location? General detention, level 4. But Jake, she's on the opposite side of the station from your current position. It would take at least 20 minutes to reach her, and we don't have 20 minutes. Jake closed his eyes for a moment, weighing impossible choices. Save Sarah and abandon a 16-year-old girl, or risk everyone's lives trying to save them both. Sarah squeezed his hand weakly. Go get her, she whispered. I can make it to the extraction point on my own. Like hell. Jake, I'm a doctor. I know my own condition. I can walk, I can run if I have to, and I know the way out. That girl needs you more than I do right now. Jake looked into his wife's eyes and saw the same determination that had made her volunteer for battlefield medicine assignments in the worst combat zones. She was right, and they both knew it. Marcus, Elena, converge on general detention level 4, Jake ordered. Sarah, take this. He handed her a sidearm and a spare comm unit. Follow the route back to the docking bay. David will guide you. What about you? Jake smiled grimly as the elevator opened onto the research section's main level. Imperial troops were already moving through the corridors. Searching for intruders. I'm going to make sure they're too busy to chase you. Jake kissed his wife quickly, then stepped out of the elevator and into the darkness. Behind him, Sarah began her journey to freedom. Ahead of him, an entire company of Imperial troops was about to learn why Earth's military had developed such a fearsome reputation. The real battle for Prometheus Station was about to begin. Jake moved through the research section like death itself, his stealth suit rendering him nearly invisible as Imperial troops flooded the corridors. These weren't the bored dock workers and casual guards they'd eliminated earlier. These were elite soldiers, heavily armed and professionally trained, moving with the disciplined efficiency of troops who'd seen real combat. It didn't matter. Jake had spent 15 years hunting the most dangerous predators in the galaxy, and Imperial training was no match for human ingenuity and righteous fury. The first squad died in the main laboratory, caught in a crossfire between Jake's position and Elena's Overwatch sniper fire. The second squad lasted longer, using their superior numbers and heavier weapons to pin Jake behind a bank of medical equipment. They might have succeeded if Sarah Kim hadn't chosen that moment to detonate her secondary charges. The research section's main power coupling exploded in a shower of sparks and debris, plunging the area back into darkness. Jake used the confusion to move, his enhanced vision giving him a critical advantage over troops relying on helmet-mounted lights and thermal imaging. Ghost Actual, this is Overwatch, came David's voice over the comm. Sarah has reached the docking bay safely. She's aboard the Retribution and ready for extraction. Jake felt a surge of relief followed immediately by renewed determination. Sarah was safe, but Marcus was still somewhere in the station with his team trying to reach his niece. Jake needed to keep the Imperial forces focused on him long enough for the others to complete their mission. All teams. Sound off, Jake ordered as he reloaded his rifle. Demolitions here, Sarah Kim reported. Secondary charges are in place throughout the station. We can bring down their communications array and main engine control whenever you give the word. Sniper team ready? Elena added. I've got 47 confirmed kills and the Imperial troops are starting to bunch up. They're scared? Infiltration team approaching target, came Marcus's voice, slightly strained. We've located the girl, but they've got her in a maximum security cell. Gonna need time to cut through the door. Jake checked his tactical display. Marcus was 3 levels away and moving toward general detention. Imperial reinforcements were converging on Jake's position from 3 directions. The math was simple. He needed to create enough chaos to keep the entire garrison focused on hunting him instead of searching for other intruders. Time to remind the Empire why humans were considered the most dangerous species in known space. Jake emerged from cover and began moving through the corridors with deliberate aggression. Instead of hiding from Imperial patrols, he hunted them. His rifle spoke with mechanical precision, each shot finding its target despite the chaos and confusion of close-quarters combat. The Imperial troops were good. Jake had to admit that. They used proper tactics, maintained discipline under fire, and had equipment that was arguably superior to anything Earth's military could field. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed they were hunting a terrorist or saboteur, someone who would try to avoid contact and escape at the first opportunity. Instead, they were facing a man who'd spent 15 years perfecting the art of killing professional soldiers. Jake didn't retreat, he advanced. He didn't avoid contact, he sought it out. Every engagement left more Imperial troops dead and the rest increasingly demoralized. Unknown intruder. This is Commander Thorne of the Prometheus Station Garrison, came a voice over the station's communication system. You are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now and you will be treated according to Imperial law. Jake found a communication panel and activated it with Voss's access codes. Commander, this is Jake Chen. I'm here for my wife, who you people decided to use as a lab rat. I'm going to kill every soldier on this station until I get her back. Your wife has already been transferred to a secure location. Your rescue attempt has failed. Jake smiled grimly. The commander was trying to demoralize him, unaware that Sarah was already safely aboard the Retribution. Commander, let me explain something to you. I've killed over 200 enemy combatants across 3 different war zones. I've eliminated targets that entire armies couldn't touch. You think a few thousand Imperial troops are going to stop me? The communication channel went silent. Jake could imagine the commander's reaction to learning that he wasn't facing a desperate civilian, but one of Earth's most elite killers. Ghost Actual, this is infiltration. Marcus's voice crackled through Jake's earpiece. We've got the package. 16-year-old girl scared but unharmed. Moving to extraction point now, copy that. All teams execute withdrawal plan Alpha. Time to go home. Jake began his own movement toward the extraction point, but he wasn't planning to leave quietly. Sarah's secondary charges were positioned throughout the station's critical systems. A few well-placed explosions would cripple Prometheus Station for months and send a message that would echo throughout the Empire. Demolitions. Execute Plan Omega, Jake ordered. With pleasure, Sarah Kim replied. The explosions began in the station's lower levels and worked their way upward. Power grids failed. Life support systems struggled to compensate, and the massive research facility shuddered as critical systems went offline. Emergency lighting bathed the corridors in hellish red light as automated systems announced evacuations and containment breaches. Jake reached the docking bay to find the Retribution already warming up for departure. The bay doors were sealed, but Sarah Kim had prepared for that too. Another explosion tore through the door controls, and the massive barriers began sliding open to reveal the star-filled void beyond. Imperial troops poured into the docking bay just as Jake reached the ship's boarding ramp. Elena's sniper fire cut down the first wave, but more soldiers were coming. Jake turned at the top of the ramp and raised his rifle for one final salvo. The Imperial troops took cover behind cargo containers and loading equipment, their training taking over despite the chaos around them. Jake had to admire their courage. They were facing an enemy who'd just crippled their entire station, but they were still trying to complete their mission. Jake, Sarah's voice called from inside the ship. Come on. Jake fired one last burst at the Imperial position, then sprinted up the ramp as the Retribution's engines reached full power. The ship lifted off from the docking bay with barely a meter to spare, accelerating into the darkness of space as Prometheus Station fell away behind them. Through the ship's viewports, Jake could see the extent of the damage they'd inflicted. Prometheus Station was dark except for emergency lighting, with debris and atmosphere venting from dozens of hull breaches. It would be months before the facility was operational again, and the Empire's most classified research programs had been set back by years. In the ship's medical bay, Sarah was examining Marcus's niece, a thin girl with dark hair and eyes that had seen too much. She was physically unharmed, but Jake could see the psychological trauma that would take time to heal. She's going to be okay, Sarah said, looking up at Jake with tired but relieved eyes. They didn't have time to do any permanent damage. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his face showing a mixture of relief and barely contained rage. Thank you, he said simply. Both of you. I couldn't have done this alone. Nobody fights alone, Jake replied. That's what makes us human. The Retribution jumped to hyperspace, carrying them away from the Vega system and toward Earth. Behind them, Imperial fleets would be mobilizing, searching for the terrorists who dared to attack one of their most secure facilities. They'd find nothing but empty space and the wreckage of their own arrogance. What happens now? Sarah asked as she finished her medical examination. Jake looked out at the stars streaming past in hyperspace. Now we go home, and we prepare for what comes next, which is war, Jake said simply. The Empire just learned that taking human families has consequences. They're going to want revenge, and Earth isn't going to back down. This was just the beginning. Sarah took his hand and squeezed it gently. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Jake smiled and pulled his wife close. The Empire had made the mistake of thinking they could intimidate humanity by targeting civilians. Instead, they'd awakened something that had been sleeping since Earth's last great war. The species that had climbed to the top of their world's food chain through intelligence, determination, and an absolute refusal to surrender. The galaxy was about to learn why humans were called the most dangerous predators in known space. And it was going to learn that lesson the hard way. As the Retribution carried them toward Earth, Jake began planning for the war that was surely coming. The Empire had ships, soldiers, and resources that dwarfed anything humanity could field. But they'd never faced an enemy that fought like humans, with ingenuity, desperation, and the kind of savage determination that came from protecting their families. The Empire had wanted to see what happened when they arrested a human woman. Now they knew. They'd awakened the ghost of every battlefield, the shadow of every war, and the fury of a species that had never learned how to give up. The hunt was over. The war was about to begin,